Good morning and welcome to St. Andrew Lutheran Church here this morning. I am Pastor Peter Johnson. I've been pastor at St. Andrew for about 9 years now. And if anything that I've learned in the 9 years that I have been part of this community is that we will take on some of the topics that are part of our lives and part of our faith and try to give some faithful perspective to them. It's important for us as we not only come in here to receive instruction, but we want to live out our faith in daily life as our mission statement is. And so how can we do that as we think about life out there and be faithful people out there as much as in here? And so our sermon series this month here is called Facing Giants. And we're taking a look at some of those giant things that can be overwhelming, that can be have a large presence in our lives. But we're trying to make them and approach them and to do some teaching about them that we hope not only informs our fellowship here as a congregation, but also as we deal with life and circumstances out there as well. And so my topic today is that giant of anger. Anger. So I have a few of these wonderful emojis, these Lego heads that my boys, we have a couple of containers in the basement full of these Legos and a few of these heads as well, these emotions that exist on those faces of Lego, but also are part of our life experience, whether we like it or not. This is something that we do experience. So we maybe don't always make a physical face like that sometimes when we're feeling anger, but I know that there are times when you can kind of feel it right in the gut, right in the heart. There's a bit of like a tightness when we encounter an anger. And it's a very real and physical and human emotion in the context of relationships that we have here within this place, but out there in the real world. What can we do about anger? So I try to think about anger in the way that I have not only experienced it personally, but the ways in which I have helped people, walked with people, held people's hands as they have struggled with circumstances of anger as a part of my ministry over 25 years. And there are times when we're angry and it's more episodic, like a one-off, like it's a come and a go and a flash in the pan kind of anger. But then there's also this ongoing chronic kind of seething under the surface anger that can happen and can inform how we are, how we carry ourselves, our disposition. Sometimes anger can be very acute and very physical and very much like those expressions on the Lego pieces. Sometimes, though, it can be much more benign and muted and kind of simmering underneath the surface. And we all know that something like that continues to simmer and simmer and simmer sometimes creates even more problems than the more acute expressions that get anger out and out into the public for processing. Sometimes anger is sometimes so far away. Sometimes it's nice that anger is a long way away, but sometimes it's harder when it's close up and personal and maybe more chronic as well. It becomes much more challenging. There is anger that you experienced recently, but then maybe you're thinking of a time in the past when you experienced anger and it's had a way of waning itself, or time has a way of making it more manageable, or simmers it down some. That's a reality with anger. Sometimes anger is completely avoided and put under the carpet. Sometimes it's confronted in these ways. Sometimes anger is justified, and sometimes it just seems so unreasonable, too. Who defines what's justified? Who defines what's reasonable or unreasonable? So our Bible passage today, this particular one that was read by Pastor Sarah in Matthew 5, is a very specific sermon where Jesus on the Sermon on the Mount is talking to his disciples about how to live together in community. If you come and want to be part of the presence of God and the community of worship in the Holy House, if you want to be in communion with people in the faith and you have anger that is within you, the Bible passage says, reconcile. Find a way forward, be present with this person, Get on the right path with this person, because when you come and are a part of the Christian community, when you're part of this internal Christian community and you're not settled, then you're not here for the right reasons. Your mind is on all these other things, and they are counterproductive or unfaithful. Jesus says, reconcile. Make it work. A little bit later on in the Gospel of Matthew 2, Jesus is even more direct about how to do that. Basically, Jesus says, go and talk to the person with whom you have your difficulties. Okay? Talk to them. This is very practical kinds of stuff. You could see this in HR offices and corporations, large and small, this process of go talk to the person. Or if that doesn't work, find one other person, go and go and talk to the person. And if that doesn't work, says Matthew 19, then go to the community. Raise it up the ladder even further and do those things. Very biblical, very practical counsel and advice. Of course, easier said sometimes than fully done in our lives when we're so caught up in anger and circumstances. And so I wanted to talk about a few things here this morning in my message. One is how we coexist sometimes with anger. And it just becomes something with which we coexist, and it comes and it goes, but it's something that is a companion. Never is there a time perhaps when we don't have it in a way. I want to talk about how to stay on track. And then I also thirdly want to talk about what I think is called a righteous anger, or an anger that's justified as people of faith, those three things. But first of all, I want to talk about coexistence with anger. This is part of what we're accustomed to. So our son Liam graduated from Edina High School on Monday evening at the Target Center. Yay, Liam! We had a grad party last weekend, and so we had a great time pulling out from our great stores of digital photos all of these pictures from our past. And one particular picture showed up, and I wanted to show you here this morning this picture of several years ago. Liam is in the black hat there, Edina baseball hat there. Maybe 5 or 6 years old here at this point. Andrew is in the middle. And our oldest son, Alex, who's 24 now. He looks 24 there, doesn't he? We are, by the way, now the smallest, the shortest people in the family now. So all three of our boys are taller than we are. This picture was taken at Herney, the mountain in Custer State Park. That is a 3.5 mile walk up 1,100 feet of elevation change. And we were thinking we were on vacation in South Dakota. Herney Peak is where we should go. Someone here at church said, you should definitely do this hike. And so you can see Liam and Andrew are still little boys, but we got going up this mountain peak. And then about 3/4 of the way up the mountain peak, or maybe it was sooner than that. Right, Michelle? Sooner, she says. We're starting to hear it from Liam and Andrew. Alex there, who's got the pack on and stuff, he's all ready to roll. But Liam and Andrew were not ready to roll, and the whining, are we almost there yet? I'm not going to make it. Have you been there with me before? Right? So as we almost neared the top, Michelle leaned over to me and said those classic words that all moms and dads say to each other, can we kill them? This is from Michelle, of all people, right? So we got to the top of the mountain, they recovered, everything was fine, and then of course going down was like a total breeze. But catch the shirt that Andrew is wearing here, which is just awesome. No one trains to be backup. Good job, way to live your t-shirt, buddy. We got all the way to the mountain, and he is not going to be the starter nor the backup with that kind of an attitude. But what I think happens with some anger is that it's easy for me, when I saw the picture, to remember that story. Michelle and I, though, had a laugh about it. Because there's something that happens with some kinds of anger where we feel it episodically in the moment and we're possessed by it. But then after a while, his time, love, has the ability to replace or to put into proper perspective the kinds of exasperating moments, kind of like that. I use the same phrase when I'm talking to people who are grieving the loss of a loved one, that hole that's created in your life will never go away. That hole will always be there, but we hope and pray that there will be things around that hole that will grow up and get bigger, and that it will almost, in effect, crowd out or put into its proper place that hole that happens when we're grieving someone, and then it can be put in a better and more proper order. I think with anger, we coexist with it sometimes. And we learn with our spouses, with our friends, even with our kids, we learn how to manage it and teach it and to understand it better moving forward. But we do coexist with it, don't we? There's a concept also, as we're talking here about Jesus' instructions to be reconciled to each other and to do this work. When Jesus says, go one-on-one, take two with you, go as a community to reconcile, to practice forgiveness and grace, as the passage reads as well, there's something about staying on track. And that we are here at St. Andrew this morning to talk about this issue because it's important that we try to the best of our ability, sinful as we are, to stay on track with these kinds of things, to manage and be faithful to God and to the community. Because sometimes it's hard to stay on track. So Michelle and I, again, another story about Michelle and me. Last week, we were at the corner of Mitchell and Technology right over here, next to the city center. We were in the left-hand turn lane, waiting. There were a few cars around, so there was a lot going on in the intersection. But something new in the intersection was going on that froze us in the left-hand turn lane. This isn't a picture of the turtle that was in the middle of the road, but that was what was kind of making it a fast pace in a way across Technology and Mitchell Road there, that busy intersection. And I remember telling to Michelle, this is going to be a total disaster, because the cars are going, we're in the left-hand turn lane, and the turtle is in our lane. And not only was I concerned about the turtle that was in front of us, but come with me for a moment into my car, I'm concerned about the people that are behind me. Because I'm thinking about not only is this turtle in front of just our car, but the cars behind me who are waiting as the light turned green for me to go, and I'm not going. And so we didn't hear a horn honk, but I was thinking to myself, I got a problem here because I've got people back here that are going to get frustrated or going to get angry because because I'm not moving. And no, I'm not like this, like we see sometimes at stop signs, people looking down. Sometimes that happens. We shouldn't do that, but that happens. I am looking, and Michelle and I are looking at this turtle. So the good news here is that there was an SUV driven by a gentleman and what presumably was his wife. And he pulled over like a police officer would pull over and block an intersection. The wife jumped out, and she took a hold of the turtle. She grabbed it on both sides, and the turtle is like this, and it's wiggling and that kind of thing, and she's moving it over to the side of the road. And then thankfully, I'm relieved that everybody can see why I'm not moving, right? But why do I have to be concerned at a left-hand turn lane that people's emotions are going to boil over? I'm going to have horn honking and all kinds of ruckus maybe going on behind me. It could be that they just don't know the whole story. And in life, in our circumstances, maybe when we get angry, we don't know the whole story. And so take a step back, let it be. Let it pan itself out fully. And when that woman grabbed the turtle and brought it to safety, Michelle and I were applauding in our car. And I know others were doing the same thing. Happy ending. But we got to stay on track. So you have to guard the kinds of things that set you off. Whatever it is in society, whatever it is in life, if it's the social media feeds or it's the stories or the negativism, we have to somehow stay on track as faithful people. Okay? I think we get off track. I think our society gets off track, and even I start thinking about what's going to happen with the cars behind me. Should I have to do that all the time? How can we be different when it comes to staying on track? And then I also want to talk about channeling our anger too, that righteous anger that isn't necessarily a bad thing at all, but there are good things to be angry about. You all know that I'm a baseball fan, and so one of the things that I'll listen to from time to time, maybe more regularly than I'm saying, is the Baseball Tonight podcast on ESPN. So I fast forward through the first 10 minutes, and then I just get into the analysis of the baseball season based on the experts. And there is one particular analyst that I have enjoyed listening to. Last fall, though, I remember even telling Michelle that I was a bit concerned about Sarah Langs, one of the baseball statisticians who makes contributing comments on the podcast every week, because she was starting to sound like she'd been drinking. I remember thinking to Michelle, why are they putting Sarah Langs on? She's always really, really profound and has great statistics to share. She's very educational, but she just isn't sounding quite right. Why do they keep rolling her out? Is there a problem with Sarah Langs? So a couple of weeks after I made that statement and made that judgment on her, they dedicated her time slot to her announcing to the podcast community and to the ESPN community and to the Major League Baseball community that she is advancing ALS. And so her speech is showing signs of being affected. And obviously, I was noticing it. Others were noticing it. And it was time for the world to know that she's suffering from Lou Gehrig's disease as a 28-year-old. She's beloved. She is someone who people look up to in the sport. She was raised in baseball with her grandmother and her mother. She often tells stories about the Mets and in her life in baseball, and she's so gentle and kind. 2 weeks ago, a week and a half ago, was Lou Gehrig's day in baseball on a Friday, and Sarah Langs became the poster person for Lou Gehrig's day within MLB. And I could tell you more about how many players have come along to her side and donated this much money or that much money or a dinner with so forth or so on. They've had her paraded out in front of many, many things. When she got the diagnosis, my point is that she was angry. How much is anger a part of how we get a diagnosis? Some point in time, though, Sarah is just Sarah, and she occupies this little space within the Major League Baseball community. But what became something that she was angry about, it shifted into something where maybe, just maybe, I can do something about it with all of my friends, all of my community that gathers around me. There's a lot of money, and there's a lot of influence. And so she's channeling now this diagnosis, and she will die. She will probably never get married, and she will die. So Jesus got angry too. And what I want to talk a little bit up here for a moment is how angriness and emotion carries weight and can drive you into something that makes a difference for your neighbor and for the community. And it's a faithful process where God is involved for you and all of us, Sarah Langs and everybody, to make a difference in the world. There was a man in the synagogue who came to Jesus with a withered hand, and the Pharisees and scribes said, "You can't do anything because it's the Sabbath. You're not supposed to do anything on the Sabbath." Well, Jesus got angry, as the Greek says, and healed this man. What's more important, compassion or the ritual of the Sabbath? Jesus is getting angry at times. Did you know also that Jesus spoke sternly to his disciples when the little children wanted to come to him, and the disciple says, "Oh, no, he has no time for you. You children are not supposed to go with Jesus, our rabbi and our leader." And Jesus spoke sternly. The word was indignant. But he had strongly addressed his disciples, said, "No, let the children come to me, for it is to them that the kingdom of God belongs." Lazarus, Mary, and Martha. When Lazarus died, Jesus came to Mary and Martha. And what made him greatly disturbed in spirit and deeply moved was the fact that Lazarus had died, and Mary and Martha had yet to see the hope of life eternal in Jesus' name. And he was greatly disturbed in spirit and deeply moved because they were grieving so hard. And he had a promise to give them that was not quite yet fulfilled. And so he was greatly disturbed in spirit and deeply moved. Jesus also threw out the money changers and turned over the tables in the temple and said, "My house is a house of prayer, not a den of robbers." Whenever Jesus got angry, it really seems that love and people and grace and purpose won. So I ask that question too of all of us. I don't think you have to be like mad at everything or something in particular, like the faces, the Lego had faces before, to get angry with something. But what I think as Christian people, what we're called to be as we follow Jesus, is that we're called to be mad at something that's not quite right in our world. If it's a people or a community or the environment, and I'm not talking mad like hoofing with steam coming out of my ears, but passionate. One of the challenges I think that we have in our lives, which are by and large comfortable lives, is that we may not be mad at anything. That happens. There are times when I've got too much that I can deal with and I can't get mad at anything. But then there are other times when I'm reminded here, that properly balanced, a righteous anger is the call that the prophets call us to be engaged in our lives. It's what we're supposed to do or be. And so my invitation to you, maybe my challenge to you, is to ask that question, is there something you're mad about? And then is there a way like Sarah Lang's or like the faithful people everywhere, how can you make a little bit of a difference for them in the world to honor God and to honor neighbor? Something to consider. But the giant in the room that we have for us and with us is the love of God. That's why you're all here. And so we have the Lord is merciful and gracious, slow to anger, and abounding in steadfast love. Repeated over and over again in many places in the Bible. There are more than just those listed there. That God is slow to anger toward all of us, but is abounding in steadfast love, is merciful and gracious. And so if there's anything that supports us, gives us fortitude as we deal with these circumstances of life, is that the trust that God is merciful and gracious, slow to anger, and abounding in steadfast love. And we are just little pieces in it of all those things that God, in his majesty and mystery, is all about. Who are we and who is God? How big is God? How loving is God? How gracious is God? And who's Peter? With Michelle on Harney Peak, when God is God, slow to anger and abounding in steadfast love. Because God is big and great and mighty. We're about like that. How could we be angry with something like this in God's creation? How can we live in anger if one of these is placed in your arms? The Gothic church, this is the one in Iceland, now in Reykjavik, but these towering churches are meant to make us feel like we're We're just a little bit of piece of God's greatness and majesty. His steadfast love endures forever, and we are just a little bit of a piece of it. There's the outside and there's the inside. But ultimately, we have this devotion to the one who says, I love you, I care for you, I forgive you, I'll give you another chance when you're angry, turn it into something good, harness it, make a difference. Because the love of God and Jesus is part of us. It's part of you. Faith, hope, and love. The greatest of these is love. But they help us seize the anger that we have, unjustified or justified, and continue on to be faithful people with the crucified Christ in our midst. So help us, God. Amen.